Good evening. Um, Good evening, good mornings, good afternoons. I think we've covered all the bases. Hoping everyone is fine and that you've had a good day, or are having a good day. Interesting times, I would think that Zambia is having politically. I think that's the term one would use. And just off the back of a lot of what's going on in our political spaces, I'm sure everyone is quite interested. And the sentiment I think that I'm picking up is, I find it hilarious, but I think there's also the element of being really angry about the outcomes of the High Court's judgment in regards to the Kabushi and Kabwata by-elections. And now this is a personal view, I just think that a lot of what people are going off is a lot of anger and sentiments where people, especially those are the sentiments that have been around today, where people just feel that the president was not advised correctly. I think those are some of the terms that are being thrown about. He wasn't advised correctly. His ministers are not doing their jobs. That's another one that's going out. In fact, if you've noticed through social media today, we have the picture of his cabinet, and some people have gone as far as actually cancelling out those they feel are not doing a good job. So I think one of the funny ones that I saw was of a guy called Don. I'm trying to remember his name correctly, but he's called Don Changa or Don Chanda. And he's actually put crosses against ministers that he felt were not doing a good job. And he was forwarding the idea that some of the ministers, if he did not know the minister just needs to go, just cancel him out and just don't entertain the minister because that minister is not doing their jobs. Another interesting, I think, article that I came across was of a gentleman called Nkonko Malembaka Pompe. And this one is a little interesting. I'll read it out and then I'll explain why. So he says, the king with no knights. Essentially, what he's done is that he says, well, where are the senior UPND politicians like Jack Mwembu, Gary Nkombo, Dipak, and even Mwelwa? They have stopped politics and now technocrats. And sadly, a third of cabinet ministers do not carry any political sway. They have no influence whatsoever. Everything they're depending on is on the president or state house like children. They are now passengers and political burdens to him. And some of them, you have to Google to know their names. And which ministry or constituency they belong to. Politics is like a chess board, and there are levels of defense before one reaches the king. Now, you are leaving the king too open with the pawns. So the praise singers, essentially, praise singers are the pawns. Imagine all kind of questions being thrown at the president, and his ministers are looking clean. How? No one to fall on the sword for the king. People should add value when appointed, not just being passengers in the name of friends. It's betrayal. The president is a very powerful office, and I wonder how it will react. Will it be towards PF or UPND? So when you punch someone bigger than you, it's wise to be scared. Someone asked why I was not teasing or commenting on the court's decision. I don't know how the president will react, but I can tell from history, it's never good for anyone when that office seems to be in the corner. So quite interesting there, because I think this sort of rounds up as many sentiments of many UPND and non-UPND members. Essentially, the blame on the president going to campaign is on the ministers. Another group of people is essentially saying that it's the advisors who did not advise the president correctly, because it was very obvious that he was going to it was very obvious that the case was in court, and there's already a precedence before that if there's withdrawals from by-elections, what normally happens is that the election needs to be redone. So people were not, the president was not being advised correctly. But I have a little different thought to it. And this is where I keep saying, I think that as many UPND loyalists, members, a whole lot of bunch of Sissies, I'm thinking, what are you scared of? What's the fear? And why is it that when something happens that isn't to our liking, then it means that there's something wrong that the president or his ministers are doing? And it's very funny. We don't want to blame the president. So we normally say it's the other person. It's the ministers. It's the people who are around him, which is what we're exactly saying, even for Lungu. And it's like all of a sudden, this presidential person who is in office doesn't have a head. He now needs to rely on the people around him. He should be listening to the correct people, and we deviate the blame as typical as we do the Zambians. We remove the blame from the person that really we should be blaming. And we say it's the people around him, it's the ministers. And like this gentleman has said, for him, he's blaming the senior UPND politicians. And he lists them out like the Jack Mwimbus, the Garin Kombos, Deepak. I'm wondering, Deepak Patel, and Mwelwa. I think he lists all those people. But I'm wondering, this is an African setup. Which boss do you go and advise in Zambia, especially? So this is the biggest office in the land. And now you're saying that these people that have been employed by the president should go and start advising the president. And I'm really wondering, are you speaking from are you speaking from a logical point of view, or are you speaking from a hurt point of view? Because I think when we're looking at the political arena, what we're essentially saying is you want what used to happen before. Okay, you want what was happening before, you want the same behavior, you want and this is where I look back at the old government, and they were a lot of crooks. Those were thieves. They were horrible people. I don't get why you'd want this government to behave like the old government. And it's like, oh no. And when you look at this government, I will list some of the strange things that even I found really strange. The first thing that I found really strange was when the Minister of Information was very quiet, dead silent. She doesn't say anything. She only comes out on particular events. She doesn't speak up. She's quite silent in approach. And then to remedy that, I think it was done to remedy that. You get a spokesperson. And you get a spokesperson for the Ministry of Information. I found that really, really strange at first. Then we had the presidential spokesperson, Mr. Bwalia, Anthony Bwalia. So ideally, we all think that the spokesperson is supposed to be like the tail of the president. He's supposed to be everywhere the president is. He's supposed to hover about the president. And now I think if you president, it's like, you know, like somebody once said, "Chisusha president," and that's what we were expecting. And then we find that this government doesn't operate on that level. In fact, the spokesperson is like a communication analyst he's remote. He's just going into every little radio station, and there are certain mornings that you wake up and you hear him on a rather radio station you've never heard of, but he's there and you listen to him, and he's typically not what everyone was expecting. I think the previous presidential spokespersons have been all journalists. He isn't a journalist, the traditional expectation. Then we came to the ministers themselves. We have different ministers coming in and out. We don't even know some of their names. They're not loud. They're not all over social media. They're not responding to accusations. They're not responding to fights. So they're just silently doing whatever. I don't know what they're doing. I will not lie and tell you that I know that they're working. I also don't know what they're doing, but they are very, very silent. Okay, we see them at events. We see them, I think when there was the president currently in the Copper Belt, we saw some of them with him on his campaign trail. So then you see some of them. But otherwise, they're quite subtle in approach. The presidential or the UPND secretariat, they're very strange. I find them very strange too. And I am a UPND aligned person, but I find them really strange. They are very welcoming. They welcome any political prostitutes, and in fact, they make it a whole point out. They deck out their chairs and and what really ticks me off is, like, I remember a time when you couldn't find UPND regalia. You'd have to make it yourself, okay? Because the PF had apparently either blocked some containers where the UPND regalia was in. So during campaign season, it was hard for you to find the regalia unless you made your own or you had from prior campaign seasons. And now what they do is they will come, all these political prostitutes, they deck out their entire, their secretariat is decked out, and they hug them and they make this whole big deal out of it. And you sat there in your head. For me, I'll be very honest, I was just looking at that and saying, this is a whole lot of crap, a whole lot of rubbish. Forgive my French. On top of that, The media team, which is the UPND media team, they don't say much. They're like, I liken them sometimes to the British monarchy media team. They're just silent. You know, they don't get back to you. They don't explain anything. They don't express themselves. I think today there was a presser by Mr. Cornelius Mwelwa, and it was just on 2 online platforms. It wasn't like everywhere. It wasn't on the radio. And he was speaking about the party as a party representative. It's a whole different ballgame, because when I look back at the PF, everyone was speaking. From, I'm trying to remember his name, the bleached guy that went into prison, I think he's out now. He would be speaking on behalf of the party. And sometimes he would even speak sense. That's what used to be a bit funny. He would equally even speak sense. Any cadre could pick up on a platform and speak on behalf or for the PF. The media team was active 24/7. Whatever story they had, they were on board, you know, telling you this, whatever propaganda they were selling or they were wanting to get into you at the time, they were saying it 24/7. You heard it left, right, and center. When it was time for the campaigns, they were doing campaigns virtually and on the ground. It was that ridiculous. You had an entire ambassador leave, absolutely innocent Kalimanshi, thanks. That's the name I was looking for. Thank you, Abel. And you had an entire ambassador come in from whatever country came in to come and help the campaign season. The PF were a breed on their own. They just did things, you know, anyhow. You had an entire minister of Lusaka, that was, if you remember him becoming some, I think he was like a traffic officer, and he would go to, you know, locations like Kafiwe and block people who were traveling out because there was COVID. That was PF. They operated on their own. They were we know, and they want to please Abantu. They did it. It didn't matter what it was, but as long as they did it, and they were very vocal. If they want to kukutuka, they'll insult you. I mean, we learned big insults. I'd never learned some of those insults that I heard from cadres during the during the campaign trail. But that was typical of the PF. Now, when we voted the PF out, I was enjoying the idea that we were moving away from that type of political space, or whatever, I would call it a space. So we were moving away from that political space. I never enjoyed that Hocho Chise, or even the innocent Kalimanshi things, or the wars. And I live quite close by, and I can tell you this, that sometimes when they would have their interpolitical fights, you'd have a group coming from, I think it's intercity or something. They were constantly in a war, and these were factions supported by actual ministers. And these 2 groups, same party, would be fighting, and they would insult each other. They would again speak on behalf of the government, and they would be praised for whatever they were saying. Man, it was a mess. So when we move from that particular political dispensation or space and we get to a new space, why do we want the same old rubbish? Because what we're essentially saying is, and we are now insisting that what happened in the last couple of days, because the president was seen to campaign in the Copper Belt, that was an embarrassment. And we want to be really robust. We're saying we are playing, you know, we should be like PF. We should do things. I think one person that said something along those sentiments is, I think he must be Kamwala, is it Kamwala South councillor? I think it's called a Mr. Simata. And I'll just, if I can find what he did say, but it was along the lines of, yeah, I think he likes calling himself Comrade Mainda. He said, we've lost grip. This was his sentiments. He says, we've lost grip. It's not even something we should hide or fear to talk about. A crisis meeting must be called. Honorable Romeo Kangombe has put it very well. We must resume command of the ship. And this was in regards to ECZ announcing that the elections will not go ahead. So essentially, he thinks because the party has no hold on the justice system, the party is not doing well. And now I'm still really confused. What type of power are you wanting? Because I mean, when we were in the PF, and a case was happening, the president was quite very much aware of what was going to happen. He knew when it was going to happen. It told you that he had some form of eyes everywhere. Now, I'm looking at HH. It didn't look like HH had any idea. In fact, he hears the news whilst he's on the campaign trail. To his credit, I think that what's happening is that institutions are now working as independently as they probably should be working. I think that's something we should commend. It looks stupid. It even looks like what and I go back to the Bible, and the Bible says, if somebody slaps you on one end, give them the other end. Especially where he says things like, no, let's forgive them. Let's forgive our friends. Let us go back, let's allow the law to take its course. Because I think that's the other thing. A lot of the UPND members, we were so abused that we felt like for our PTSD to heal, let's go and do what they did to us. Let's go and take the spaces in the bus stations. Let's go and take the spaces in the markets. Let's go and take up the spaces. Once I'm down where they had all these to my chairperson, let's go and take these spaces. It's now us to let. It's us who are now, we are the ones who are now ruling the nation. So let us take up the spaces. And then HH goes, oh no cadreship, and we're going to forgive our friends, and we're just going to start working, and let's allow the law to take its course. That sounds like afterward we had not give him the next trick, and it sounds very stupid. And it looks like maybe Tapali from Lechta. But the truth is that this is it's a new dawn. And I don't understand how we can sing, and we're so excited as praise singers. We can, in one voice, say, any new dawn, new dawn. And then when they are doing the new thing, we keep insisting, I'm really confused. And we're now putting the government under a form of pressure for them to begin to behave the way the PF used to behave. We want them to be savage like the PF, where we want them to take because I'm wondering what does Simata mean when he says it is time, we've lost a grip. It's not even something we should hide or fear to talk about. We need to get command of the ship. What command are you wanting? What really command are we wanting of the ship? The president is the UPND. He's leading, he's in command of his ship. So why do we want a command of a ship the way we know it from these past years? Because when I look at what they do, this is a completely new dawn. They don't do what you want or what you're expecting has been happening all these years. And I think we should be commending them for being really down to earth and being unique. And when they say that they're a new dawn, they are indeed a new dawn. You will never hear the minister of, well, we did hear at one point, and when she tries to, and this is where this is the tragedy of it. What normally happens is you begin to look what people were. Because I can tell you this, do you remember when she made a statement along the lines that Mr. Sean Tembo maybe likes her did she say he likes me more? Something along those lines. It sounded very silly because she's now copying their style. And that's not who she is. We just see the works happening. We don't hear them saying whatever it is that they're saying. But when they try to copy it, they look really silly. Let's just be really bluntly honest, because when she comes across, that's the Minister of Information, and she tries to do the whole church, she said thing, she actually does come across quite silly. And that's why everybody now calls her Beyonce or the princess, all these funny nicknames that we have for her because she's quite pretty. But I think we need to give credit to the UPND government, and this is not a political thing, but this is a common sense thing, I think. If you look at it, they are not conventional or what we have been used to. PF, they don't do that. They don't do it. They are unique because they're the new dawn. They do their own style, they do their own work, and we need to credit them and allow them to actually do their jobs. If they can make all these reforms, like the education, free education, they can employ as many as the 30,000 plus the 11. So we're looking about something like 44,000. My math is very bad, but that's my attempt. So about 44,000 employed. We are seeing a bailout package. They've managed to get a bailout package. Now we are able to sit down and have a little bit of a breather. There's some resources in the country's bank. People are able to look at the economy at our economy is better, though it's still a pain for the people at the lower end. Yes, it's still a pain, but we can see there's some development. The price of fuel, the fuel commodity goes down and up, but it's working. Something is happening. Something is really working, and we can see it. So why do we want to nitpick at the small things that don't even matter? Because I mean, if we are getting free education, we are getting employment, we are getting conducive environments for people to do businesses, why should we crucify the government for a small thing as the media team? It's beyond me. And I think somebody just commented. So Doshani Mutambo, Mushiwa, you yourself, you can't see something is wrong with you in Zambian English. You yourself, so sorry. Can you not see? Thank you very much. I don't think there's anything wrong with the UPND. You're just smarting from a legal pronouncement, and the legal pronouncement simply say that the election needs to be put on hold. There is nothing wrong with that. That is a legal stance by a court, and that was the High Court. And it's so commendable that it was not influenced by a political party. Mwale Fimona, you used to see these things. How many of you did not see the ministers who got free what do you call it? Ministers who were getting acquitted, and now we can't take them back to court, even though we have proof now, but they're acquitted. I mean, the honeybee guys, I think it's the honeybee bosses, they were taken to court a couple of weeks ago, and you know what the lawyer said? Oh, they were acquitted, they can't be charged. And yeah, they can't be charged. Why? Because there was some influence. You and I know, we know the truth, that there was influence. So why do you still want that influence to still trickle into the UPND because you want to look like you're ruling? You're already ruling. Why do you have to be convinced that you're ruling? You have a president who is ruling. You have a government that is UPND. Why does it have to look like Mwelwa for you to feel like? Because what really matters is the actual work, the concrete work that they're doing. And the concrete work that they're doing on the ground is a whole lot more sensible than just you getting angry that the court's judgment was something that the president did not get told. For me, it just seems so small in comparison to what they've done and that act of him going to Copperbelt. And it was stated he went for a working visit to the Copperbelt, which included some of that campaigning, whatever thing we saw. But I'm wondering why you'd feel that it looked like they've lost. What have they lost? Because whether we like it or not, and this is my stance as well, I would prefer that Mr. Mlanji and Mr. Bowman do stand and they actually win. Then we see indeed if they're actually winning. Yes, the law is so silly. That law is just ridiculous. There's no way we gave her. Then go back to we saw whether my local sister apply it. It's stupid. But the fact is, ever pangele law you're in. And I would really like it that same law comes and bites them in the butt. But I don't understand what you're really fearing and why you would want to bring to task the UPND because you feel that they look like they've lost or now lose. And why is it that we're so hungry for this image of winning? You know, we know that the PF were a dirty batch. They were a dirty batch. They messed up the constitution. They went and they messed it up. And whatever it is, they thought. And this is where I always want to even ask as many people who get angry about this. When that constitution was being made, some of you were actually in those groups. The same civil service, they like calling themselves the civil society by NGO, and it's the same people. They were the same people again who, when that constitution was being made, they're the ones who are still sat there, and they're now non-aligned to a PF, and they're very quiet. Even pastors, you know, our pastors, they were there, and they're very quiet. But these are the messes they made, and now you want to feel that you've lost based on if you go back, you know. It's very very confusing. I'm finding it very confusing that as many UPND aligned people are very disappointed about what's happened, and the disappointment is now, oh, you're now calling for the president to now fire his employees, and you don't even, because I mean this is 1 year on. When you're saying I don't know this minister, and some of the ministers that some of you saying you don't know are the education ministers, but we have free education. Who is in charge of that free education, if not the education minister? You know, it feels very I would say that it looks like we are sissies, and I think the PF really enjoy this because that's why they're at every radio station. They're on every radio station. They're at every TV station. But you're the ones who are ruling, but you're not the ones who are ruling. It's very, very strange. And I would prefer that if you are ruling, then because it doesn't make sense. And when some of these articles are being circulated by people who are quite well known, what you do is you're going to begin placing these sentiments into the people who are leading. There is actually nothing wrong that the UPND have done, as far as I'm concerned, on their leadership style. There are some things. I'm not going to say they are great at everything. No. There's some things that they're actually poor at, and there are things that they are great at. But on this instance, I don't see anything wrong. I just see us running scared of what fear it is that from the fear, and you want to castigate the government over something that doesn't even hold weight. What is Kabushi and okay, to be honest, what is Kabushi and Kwacha? These are two constituencies. If you were saying that these constituencies were so important, maybe, but these constituencies don't have any. I don't know. And this is not to rubbish the area that is Kabushi and Kwacha. But what is the biggest? And we give relevance to rubbish. That's the other problem that because when we keep insisting that the president has made a mistake, why are we giving relevance to these candidates who didn't even stand? They didn't even manage to go and put in a nomination. But we've given them a lot of relevance in the last couple of weeks. We have been celebrating the fact that they didn't get in to start with. Then we were celebrating the fact that they were trying to put a stay. And now and that's why we're disappointed. We're actually supposed to be disappointed with ourselves and not even with the president. It has nothing to do with him. It's our kind of blindness and misapplied, excitement over anything political, because we're too political sometimes as well. That's the problem. That's probably where the disappointment should probably be coming from, rather than from the president and his ministers. It's too early to demand for shuffles. And I think where he's needed to fire people, he has fired them. Just this afternoon, we've had the DPP being suspended and somebody being replaced. So when there's a need and we see it, he does act. But I don't think that it's actually right for us to insist that the ministers need to be brought to book. That is very, I just want to read this one. I think that's by Mr. Dao Habasimbi. We need numbers in parliament to be able to assert our agenda. We have the numbers already. We have the majority. What numbers are we wanting? Sometimes when I say we are still thinking what about PF. For any successful democracy to happen, we need a balance of more political parties. Otherwise, we risk having a dictatorship. The moment you talk about numbers when we are already dominant, the UPND is already in dominance. We already have so many UPND members in comparison to the opposition or even independents. So what more numbers are we needing? The moment we adjust ourselves, who will tell us that you're doing fair? We create dictatorships. We really need to change. We need to change our mindsets. We are still so tainted and abused by, I would say, I think, what's the term? Ka victim syndrome. We still have a victim syndrome. And probably that's why we're itching to constantly behave or beat by PF. By PF Mashiru. I'll not lie. PF Mashiru. Are they not in Ethiopia? Are they not currently in Kenya? What are they doing in Kenya? Just think about it. They've gone to Kenya for an inauguration. It has nothing to do with them. They are not in power. Even PF is not a link, but EFF have this thing where they have parties in different countries. That they're not even part of that. It's not like that. But PF the Kenyan government but they went to an inauguration. So when I say PF, that's what I mean. But you want us to where Kumalushi? and behave like that same mentality. Just because you want to feel nice that you are dealing them or you're winning against them. And that is going to be so retrogressive. And that's why I'm so for HH when he says, you know what, just ignore them and get on with the job that is at hand. I think we shouldn't even be concentrating on UPN, PF, Kavushi, and those sorts. We shouldn't really be. But I think we're so political and we're so blind-sided, and we have that same mentality, you know, hate mentality, which I call a PTSD from from being in the opposition. So we feel like we are supposed to deal them all the time. And even when this is an independent decision by a high court, we think that it is evidence of the PF still being in power. So we really need to get it out of our heads. And I think the more of us that are praise singing from a logical point of view, rather than from a victim point of view, the better for a lot of us. There's nothing to fear. I'm really confused why we are fearing, why we are disappointed, why we even think that the president is very, whatever, advisors. Advisor, Besa. That's the other question I'm also asking. We're advisors. Just because you're a minister does not mean you're the president's advisor. And advice is taken on. You can give the advice, but it's up to the person to take the advice or not take the advice. So you cannot blame an advisor. It's not. We're not in a monarch. We're not in a monarch where you begin to blame the advisors, part of the council, and the council did not. That's not how our government works. There's a president, and then he has his advisors here and there, but he's not obligated to listen to them. And even if they did advise him, maybe to say, don't go and campaign, I think wherever HH was going to pass, a crowd was going to follow. It would still have looked like he's campaigning. Should he not have campaigned when he went there? It's up to debate. I think looking at the dates, and if he helped someone here in Kabwata, why should he not go and help somebody campaign in Kavushi or Kwacha? We're being very selective. The only element, maybe the difference here, is that the case was in court. Maybe I'll be honest, maybe there should have been a little bit reservation and thought, maybe if it's in court, let's safely sit. But I think that safely sitting was also going to be detrimental. As is, he has already campaigned, he doesn't need to go back. Even when they go, because those elections are still going to happen. They're going to call for fresh elections with a fresh date. They're still going to happen. HH has already campaigned. He moves on. I highly doubt he's going to go back. If he does, maybe he enjoys. I would say maybe I enjoy my campaigns because he never had the chance to campaign when he was meant to be doing the presidential campaigns. Maybe, but that's the only thing. Maybe there were little inconsistencies there, maybe, but it's not something that should make us feel like, no, the king doesn't have pawns, he doesn't have protection, he doesn't have. I think what we are really going way off the logical route here. And I think our fear or our hurt is what is speaking and not. And I mean, this is a time for, by now, we should have healed. This is 1 year. We have seen what the UPND has done, and we can proudly say, look, we were right to vote for them. So I don't think there's any need for us to fear, to get angry, to say, no, it's, maybe. There's a misunderstanding, I think. Mr. Chilimanasaki says it's not fear, it's misunderstanding the current misplaced constitution. Okay, granted, but the constitution was made by who? That's the thing. It's the previous government. Not well made, but there are all these additions by different governments that have come along. So I think that's a problem. We really need to wake up and just look at things as they are. We need to change our mindsets. If it's a new dawn, it's a new dawn. Why should we be behave Kalimanshi? When something happens, we begin to scare. Hey, and it just messes up, because I think even us as cadres who are like the praise singers, we should be a whole lot more intelligent, a whole lot more different from the odd crop. I'm so sorry. We are not Bene Kalimanshi. So why should we behave like Bene Kalimanshi? And get different factions and that kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Seen a couple of comments here. My observation That's Rachel. And my observation is that UPND is not as proactive as you would expect from a party in government. So even when they react, it's not timely and concise. Spoken, written words are powerful on the psyche of masses. Okay, granted. But I still go back. If they are working within 1 year, they've done everything. Why do you want to hear from them? What? Ideally, I'm a cadre, but I actually don't want to just be hearing words. I want to see the work. And I think we hear the president speak. Is that not enough when he speaks? And he's the most important person in that group. So when he speaks, you know it's got weight. So even when you're saying that they're not as proactive, I don't know. I just think they're very different. And they're working on that different wavelength. And we should allow them to work on that different wavelength. Because you don't. They're doing things a unique way. So I think you have a point. Mr. Kangwa Kasonde says they have taken advantage. I suppose they're talking about the PF here. They have taken advantage of our fear to come out and say they're in charge of courts, which is totally a big lie. Absolutely. If they were in charge of the courts, would they not have been braaiing around that roundabout like last time? You know, remember those cadres who used to take a braai pack and they would be by roundabout waiting for judgments? You know, so I think we just. So Mr. Maurice Mudende watching from Shangombo, Western Province. I'm from Kwacha constituency. So this is Mr. Absen Zulu Maus. I'm from Kwacha constituency, and for sure there's nothing to point at in Kwacha. And these things happening that Malanji is popular, I don't see it. This is a really good point because I ask myself this. If Mr. Malanji is such a big millionaire, billionaire, and he has all these businesses, why does he want to be a minister? How much does a minister get paid in comparison to the big businesses that he has? It's the same thing with Mr. Bowman. Somebody else says just poverty comes out of Kabushi and Kwacha. Mr. Roy Daliso says, what is Kabushi and Kwacha? Ask HH, he will tell you why he had to shift the entire presidency to the Copper Belt, including the vice president. Well, what I understand is that he was working from the Copper Belt. So people who are supposed to be close to him when they're working in his team, does he not move with the team? I don't know. Maybe I'm not seeing it your way. Mr. Jethro Mulanga says, power is not in the talking, but actions. Let the government work and work and work. The opposition has no message to share with the Zambians and things are hard for them. It's time to work, not politicking. I'm all for this. I totally agree with you on this one. Mr. Dao Habasimbi says, your narrative is typical of Western type of politics. It doesn't work in Africa, my cutie sister. Okay, thanks. Political power is heavily interfaced with developmental campus. I'm a little lost on the second half of your statement, but I think when you say your narrative is typical of Western types of politics, I'm inclined to think that the UPND are actually quite Western in approach. They're not the typical African to give you all sorts of promises and in your face telling you all sorts of things. So I would think they are more that way than that. So political power is heavily interfaced with the developmental campus. I'm a bit lost on that one. I need to understand that. Mr. Hector Sindazi says, never argue with a fool. People might not notice the difference. I think this is really good. I think that's the stance that the media team has taken. It's very easy to get into a chochise with the PF, and they love that because then they know they have you where they want you to be. I'll give you an example. One time they were discussing about the developmental activities they had done, and they were bragging about hospitals and stuff like that. And they were saying things like, oh, look, we were the ones that were building all these, the whatever developmental things they were talking about. And so you're now able to employ teachers because we built classes. Now, when they're saying this, which classes did they build? Because children sat on the floor, meaning the spaces are still, so and they get you into all these things, and they're very good at this. I mean, when you talk about the spin doctor, people call him the spin doctor. I call him the ambassador from Tigray, Bakafuzila. And I say Kabuzila because he has a way with his words where he speaks very softly, and when he lies, And you're like, and you keep asking me. He even makes his voice a little more gentler, and he draws you in. So people at the PF were very, very they crafted the art of selling propaganda very well, and it works for them. But I don't think the UPND should be drawn into that kind of political thing. If that's not their stance, so why should they go into such rings? And what are they going to get? What are they going to, just to satisfy us as cadres, that everybody basuka? You know, there's all that going on. So I'm just thinking that we are fearing nothing, I would say. So True Mulenga Chomba says, completely agree with you. The issue is that Zambians do not fully understand what democracy is. They have it confused with dictatorship rule. And just look at the USA and UK, not all decisions are favorable to the ruling party. The judicial is independent and we need to embrace this. HH, we are still behind you. So that's somebody that is... Miss Nora Madden says, very pretty, but wrong ministry for her, my opinion. So this is, I'm sure they're talking about the Minister of Information. It's not easy though, but doing things differently is worthy. So that's Mr. Kipamba Mwali. So these are some of the sentiments. So I can tell that we're still, it's a mix and people are a little emotional about it. So it's expected. I think it's expected. We just need to move and shift our mindsets to allowing the political or the politicians to do their jobs. I don't think the media team, the UPND media team being so robust at answering and being chochise kind of thing is going to be developmental in any way. It will just make us feel nice. So I would say let them work, let them do the actual work that is needed to happen. And ideally, I think at the moment they're really pushing for economic reforms, which is what they've concentrated on. And now I think when we begin to see some of these judicial issues, we can clearly see that there's a problem in this law and that law, then they're going to get to it. I think they're definitely going to get to it because I think some of those laws are quite archaic or silly. Because I think why should somebody be arrested because they called the president or they likened the fuel rises and to a female menstrual cycle? It's distasteful to talk about, but I don't think it warrants somebody being arrested and said, "Do you have, and that is what's happening because by being so emotional about it, zero balance, so, and you get him arrested, you give him a platform for him to make noise and put some relevance, and he's not relevant. Come on, guys, he's zeros. What relevance does a zero have? Apart from kufshempendwa and beginning of a sentence as zeros, but we are giving relevance to even rubbish because we want to be that relevant. So I think some of these laws need to be scraped off. And people will always insult you. It doesn't matter that you're the president. I mean, if you're the president, I think you're the best target to be insulted because you are common to everyone. But I highly doubt that it's in this day and age we should even be talking about some of the laws like where, if you tell the president off or you say something distasteful, then you get arrested. So I think that's my thoughts. Mr. Doshani was waiting until you insulted by praise team. Your page is becoming useless. Okay, well, can't do much about that. That's typical of life. People will insult you. We're not going to die. So thanks so much for those that listened. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for those that shared. And those that have opposing views, thank you so much. It makes everything more colorful. And we're able to have a discussion, I think, rather than simply me harping about what I think. And it opens up a different ball game. We're able to discuss something and we're each learning from each other. It's not a dictatorship. So thanks so much for listening in. Good night to those in Zambia. Good morning and good afternoon for those that are listening in from other places. I saw somebody, I've forgotten your name. This is so bad. I've forgotten your name and you're in America and I'm supposed to remember your name. So I do apologize. So thank you so much for watching and listening in, and good night.